Welcome to another edition of Bards in the Basement. Sometimes I feel like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, hibernating in my cellar, or a less cynical, less angry underground man from Dostoevsky's novella Notes from the Underground. Today's poem is The Man He Killed by Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was a 19th century, early 20th century novelist slash poet. This poem was published in 1902, shortly after the end of the Second Boer War. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the poem, and then I'll walk through the poem, if you will, line by line, stanza by stanza, and I'll address the literary devices on the right hand side of your screen. Let us first hear the poem, though. The Man He Killed by Thomas Hardy. Had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet right many a nipperkin. But ranged as infantry and staring face to face, I shot at him as he at me, and killed him in his place. I shot him dead because he was my foe, just so. My foe, of course he was. That's clear enough. Although he thought he'd list perhaps offhand, just as I was out of work, had sold his traps, no other reason why. Yes, quaint and curious war is. You shoot a fellow down, you treat if met where any bar is, or help to half a crown. It's a wonderful poem that kind of examines the absurdity of war. When I start going through the poem, first I'm going to talk about the first three literary devices on the right hand side, and then I'll start walking through line by line, stanza by stanza. But these three set up the overarching devices in the poem, if you will. The setting of the poem. The whole poem takes place between quotation marks. This suggests that maybe it's an overheard conversation in an old ancient inn and you have a couple of veterans talking about their experiences. Or maybe the quotation marks suggest that this is taking place inside the speaker's mind, that we're following the speaker's thoughts as he tries to rationalize and come to understand better what happened on the battlefield. Of course, the speaker of the poem is a soldier or a veteran reflecting, ruminating about his experiences. The juxtaposition of the poem. I think this is really interesting. The juxtaposition is the placing of side by side objects, ideas, images. But here we have the juxtaposition of two encounters. One encounter on the battlefield, in which the speaker of the poem shoots his foe, kills him. The other encounter is an imaginative one. If we had met in a bar, we would have had a drink together. If he were down on his luck, I may have given him a half a crown. So this juxtaposition creates a poetic tension, if you will, in the poem. So those three literary devices are overarching literary devices. And the rest of the literary devices we can see throughout the poem, and I'll talk about them as we go through the poem now. So I'm going to the first stanza, and you'll notice that I have some of the words bold, and those words are the stressed syllables. And so the writer here, Thomas Hardy, is using a ballad form, and the ballad form is typical of romantic tales, romantic stories, also nursery rhymes, which is interesting that he uses the ballad form, which suggests a lightness, a playfulness, a romanticness, if you will, a sing-song quality, but he employs that to examine war and the ideas of war and the experiences of war. So there seemed to be some somewhat ironic tension created by the form and the content, if you will, of the poem. So I'm going to go to the first stanza, and I'll try to capture that sing-song quality and the stressed syllables. Had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet right many a nipperkin. So we have he, I, met, some, an, in, should, sat, wet. Those are the stressed words or stressed syllables. So we have unstressed followed by stress. We call this iambic trimeter, or in the third line, iambic tetrameter. And so it's soft syllable followed by a hard syllable. Once again, creating that sing-song quality, that nursery rhyme type sound to the poem, lilt to the poem, if you will. But what we have here in the first stanza, we have the speaker of the poem suggesting, had he and I, the soldier and I, my foe and I, met in an inn, we would have sat down for a nipperkin. Nipperkin is a measure of alcoholic drink in England. And so they would have sat down and had a drink. If that were the case. The second stanza starts with the word but, to suggest, but we didn't meet in this inn. But we didn't meet and sit and have a drink, but we met ranged as infantry. We have ranged as infantry instead of arranged. And throughout the poem, Hardy will use ranged or list for enlist or a phrase like offhand like to create this kind of informal, casual tone, a lightness of the tone. Once again, we have this casual lightness tone, and that's in contrast or in tension with the content of the poem. But we have this colloquialism in word choice, if you will. So, but ranged as infantry, staring face to face, I shot at him as he at me, and killed him in his place. Period. That's the name of the poem. The man he killed. I killed him. That's what I'm here for. That's why I'm on the battlefield. And so, but we didn't meet in that inn. We met on a battlefield, and so I killed him in his place. Period. End of story, if you will. Make sure you read the punctuation when you're reading a poem too. You'll notice in the first stanza, the first and the third line, there's no punctuation. We call that enjambment. And when the poet decides to leave punctuation off at the end of a line, the lines run together a little bit faster. The pace might be a little bit faster. Also, there's an intimacy between that line, the first line, and the next line. And when the poet employs commas, exclamation points, periods, semicolons, the poet wants to slow down the pacing of the poem. I love the French term for enjambment, or the French meaning of enjambment, which means to stride over, striding over. You're striding over the piece of punctuation. You're striding over that pause to move the line a little bit quicker. So we had that first stanza suggesting they'd sit down and have a drink. The second stanza, as I noted, starts with a conjunction, but we didn't meet in a bar. We met on the battlefield, and I killed him in his place. End of story. Not so quick, though. The third stanza starts with, I shot him dead because, dash. Repetition, next line, because. I shot him dead because, pause, because, the word because repeated. It's as if the poet or the speaker of the poem is trying to come to terms with why he shot him, why he killed him in his place. I shot him because he was my foe, just so. My foe, of course he was. That's clear enough. Clear enough. Notice the dashes, the commas, the colon, the semicolons. There's two semicolons, all slowing down the lines of poetry. The speaker wants us to slow down and to follow his thoughts as he comes to terms with what he did and why he did it. I did it because he was my foe. My foe, of course he was, as if to convince himself, yes, just so, he was my foe. Of course, that's clear enough. That's clear enough. Absolutely clear, we think, but not too quick. Once again, all the punctuation slows that down. Oh, going back up, I love the use of alliteration in the second stanza, face to face. It creates a greater intimacy between the speaker and the person he kills. We're face to face on the battlefield. Also, face to face, we can then picture this face to face meeting in a tavern, having a pint together, if you will. And also, the face to face sets up the foe, my foe, the repetition of foe in the third stanza. Face to face, he is my foe. Face to face, maybe he's not my foe, maybe he's someone I'm sharing a drink with. So I do like the use of F's in the second stanza, and I think they connect sound wise nicely with the F's in the third stanza. Now, going to the last line of the third stanza, we have that's clear enough, semicolon. Although, I kind of read that although, well, maybe not so clear. Maybe it's not as clear as I want it to be. Although, enjambment, no punctuation after although, so we drop down to the fourth stanza quickly. Although he thought he'd list, perhaps offhand, like just as I was out of work, had sold his traps, no other reason. Why? once again, this stanza is littered with punctuation. We have two commas in the first line. We have two dashes in the second line, two more dashes in the third line, and then a period at the end. And now we have the speaker of the poem. I'm doing something nice here. Not only just showing us how he felt about joining the war, but imagining maybe the man I killed. Maybe he enlisted offhand, just like I did. Not, I just, I had nothing else to do, so offhand, on the whim, I decided I would enlist. Just as I, that phrase, just as I, set off by the dashes, is to show how the foe and the speaker may have enlisted for the same reasons, just as I did. He was out of work. He sold his traps, his belongings. No other reason why. Period. Once again, end stop. And when I get to that period, I think no other reason why. There's no great patriotic motivation to join. There isn't this like, oh, I'm going to go off and fight the evil empire. No, I was out of work. I had nothing else to do, so I might as well join the army. Not to go save the free world from this encroaching evil empire, if you will. So no, and so there's an intimacy once again created between the speaker and the person, the man he killed. Just like that intimacy was suggested at the old ancient inn, just like that intimacy is suggested in the last stanza with I might give this person a half a crown. Let's go to the last stanza. Yes, semicolon. Yes, quaint and curious war is. That word quaint suggests something, a cottage, if you will, by a pond, a lake, if you will. Quaint suggests that old ancient inn. I love the fact that Thomas Hardy, the poet, connects the first stanza with the last stanza with the word quaint. Yeah, because an old ancient inn, you can picture a roaring fire, wood paneling, booths, and it's quaint scene where two men might talk about their experiences in the war and tell stories. And so we have that word quaint, and it's also an example of understatement. There's nothing quaint about war. You kill a man, or you kill men, or you're killed. That's not quaint. And then the next part of that line, curious war is. War is curious. Yeah, it is curious to kill somebody that you might take out for a drink or you might help to a half a crown. A word that could work equally as well would be absurd. Yes, quaint. And absurd war is. It's absurd if you think about it. And this is what the speaker has done. This is what the speaker has done throughout the poem. He's thinking about his experiences. He's ruminating about the man he killed because it shows that he's uneasy about what happened out there. So the words and the punctuation and the line breaks all point to this unease, this internal conflict that the speaker of the poem is experiencing. It's absurd what I did out there, possibly. You shoot a fellow down, you treat if met where any bar is, or help to half a crown. It is absurd that, you know what? If I saw this man on the street and he needed a half a crown, I might flip him a half a crown. Or if this gentleman was in a bar, I might take him out for a drink or something like that. But no, I'm going to shoot him down because he is my foe. Of course, he is my foe. So that repetition, once again, the use of punctuation, the line breaks, the words chosen by the poet all point to the internal conflict and the unease that this soldier is feeling. Now, I did explicitly address setting, speaker, and juxtaposition to start. I've mentioned the caesura. Those are the extended pauses. Those are created by the punctuation. Those are the pauses that stop the line from moving smoothly, shows an uncertainty on the speaker's part, and we, the reader, slow down to think about those words. Once again, I did talk about the meter. Iambic trimeter is the predominant one, then slips into iambic tetrameter. See the third line of the first stanza. But if you noticed, I stumbled over the fourth and fifth stanza while I was reading them, and I think that stumbling is for us to kind of reflect or mirror what the speaker of the poem is doing. He is stumbling over these ideas. He's stumbling over these ideas. Talked about the ballad form, the tone, the irony of the situation. You think about that the tone, the form, the irony of you treat this person to a drink if you weren't arranged on the battlefield. So I hope that you are able to walk away from this video with some ideas about what Thomas Hardy was doing. You have a sense of how the literary devices were employed by the poet to address the absurdity of war, to show the conflicting feelings the speaker of the poem might have about what he had done on that battlefield. And as I said, this poem works well whether it's the Second Boer War, World War I, World War II, any war where the soldier pauses to think about what he and now she might be doing out on the battlefield. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. If so, give it a thumbs up and look for the next Bards in the Basement coming soon. Thank you so much.